firstly, very important clarification. So the resolution states that irregardless of whether the country of the origin of the artifact asks for returning of that artifact, we're still going to do it as a Western country. That is to say, even if African country or even if Egypt doesn't ask for that artifact, we're still going to return it. Major clarification, what they're talking about, if something is really important for them, if religious artifact is so important and Turkey asks for returning that from the London Museum, then London Museum is most likely to go on the negotiations because it does know the very past of how that happened, because it does know that in status quo the negotiations, if the country of origin asks for that artifact, already happens. And so what they talk about, the importance and etc., it doesn't work. But more importantly, about the moral obligation, we believe that that moral obligation simply doesn't work, because history is a complex subject and you don't know how necessarily things happen. When they say that it's really like a simplified version, like you come and take that object and that's it. Like now you have a moral obligation to bring it back. However, they have to prove, like in the vast majority of situations in status quo, we see that that kind of moral obligation doesn't work. For instance, Russia acquired territories of Kazakhstan unjustly in the past. However, we don't say that the Russians have a moral obligation to return it, simply because that's history. The world is like a very complex cross-sectional place where everything has happened due to many complex reasons, and you can't possibly say that one has a moral obligation to the others. But more importantly, why do people now have a moral obligation to return an artifact and to apologize for the very fact of what their ancestors did? Like, we don't understand, because the people who are living now are really distant from what the ancestors did, and we don't necessarily understand why people in the current times have the moral obligation to apologize for something other people did in the past that they're not related to. So there are two things that I'm going to talk about. Is that firstly, on a principle level, why those Western museums have a right to show off those artifacts in their museums, and secondly, why it is a much better environment for saving those artifacts in the Western museums. So before that, a really important clarification. We should clarify why museums exist in the first place. Museums, they depict history. They depict their cultural past. They raise awareness about the major historical events. So the first thing is that it's like the history is really cross-sectional. We cannot point out that there was a history of the Western country and then there was a history of the developing country, etc. In the vast majority of cases, those different histories they interact with each other. So, for instance, when the UK colonized countries in the past, so it did happen, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's like the very fact that the Western country was a colonizer is just a part of history. And even if it's unpleasant past, you cannot reverse time. Neither can you ignore that historical past. In that situation, we say that the Western museums have a full right to depict history because that's something what they did in the past. That's something that they've did in the past, and that's also a part of their history. Even if it's not the most pleasant one, even if it's not the time that they're most proud of, it is still a part of their history. Therefore, Western museums have a right to depict those artifacts.
Why
Yes?
isn't the contemporary German government is still paying the reparation for the First and Second World Wars?
So the thing is that countries are trying to. They know the history in the past, and the reason why they're paying reparations is specifically because they know that something has caused so much harm on the practical level. That is to say, people are suffering, people don't have food to eat, and etc. But they have to prove why those harms are exactly the same that come from the absence of those artifacts. Germany is paying reparations because it knows how much practical harm it did, because it knows how history was physically destroyed. However, they have to prove why the absence of artifacts causes the same kind of practical harm. But more importantly, coming back to our argument why Western museums actually have a right to depict those artifacts, we say that. We say that on our side of the house, if we look now on the Western country, we don't only see like white people. We still see a lot of people coming from Egyptian households. We still see a lot of people coming from India, and there are like a lot of people of different cultural backgrounds simply because of the colonizational past, right? And whenever they go to the museums, we think that they also should have a right to see their cultural past, simply because history is cross-sectional, and there are a lot of ways when the history actually interacted with each other. So we believe that on our side of the house, the very fact that, okay, well, even if your country colonized other countries, it is still like a very major part of history, and you have a right to depict that, even if you don't like it. But more importantly, the second argument, we say that it's a much better environment for the saving of those artifacts. That is to say, Western museums do have a lot of resources, do have a lot of capital to keep those artifacts, in place. The moment when you start returning those artifacts back to the countries when even they didn't ask for, is the moment those countries are like, well, we do agree that those artifacts are important, but we don't have a capacity to keep them, or we don't have a capacity to save them. And we should understand that those artifacts are like 100 years old, and it's really necessary for you to keep them, to always spend a lot of money and to keep them. More importantly, on our side of the house, we say that the moment those Western museums are actually interested in saving those artifacts, while returning them back to the countries where they originated, we don't actually see that kind of a lot of desire for them to get those artifacts back. In another side of the house, we see that in those Western museums, there are a lot of tourists, there are a lot of people visiting those museums, and they're able to see those very signs of the past, those very signs of the history on our side of the house. Well, on their side of the house, the moment you export those artifacts back to the African country, it's not accessible to a lot of people, simply because, firstly, it's not accessible even to the local, because as they say, locals are poor and they don't have money to go to the museums, or they have far more priorities about earning food and etc. But secondly, it's now not accessible to a lot of people outside of Africa, that is outside of African country, that is, they don't have a capacity to look at those artifacts. While on our side of the house, it's far more accessible to everyone, and we more importantly believe that those Western museums have a moral obligation to keep those artifacts. Thank you.
I thank the Speaker for those final remarks, and I invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the debate for the side position here.
Three things in speech. First, why principle matters in this debate. Second, how principle of ownership works and how the principle of ownership can be considered justly. And we already explained a lot of things. Second of all, the comparison of the groups about which we talk. And third of all, the best case of opposition in comparison with the best case of opposition, why even in that case we still would win the debate. But before, several things which is not included in the plan, which I already explained. The first thing about the framing. When they say that London Museum or British Museum is interested to return a lot of artifacts, we do not believe, and we believe it's factually not true, Mr. Speaker. Even Australia being really powerful Western state, cannot take back schools of their ancestors of a lot of people, because it's really important for their museums, it's really important for their research and development in vast majority of instances, besides the cultural heritage and symbolism about we talk about the different aboriginal people who live there, and we'll explain that it's extremely important, Mr. Speaker. Moreover, even if they are not willing, African countries to not to take it back, there are two things. First, it doesn't mean that they do not want to. They understand that the bargaining power is extremely different on both sides of the house. Therefore, the British British Museum is more likely to be more powerful than several African countries or even the whole African continent together. And we explained to you that in the vast majority of instances they also have some more important economic problems, but it doesn't mean that the symbolism doesn't stand. It doesn't mean that people still require that. It doesn't mean that people still want that, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, we believe it's simply going to work. The second thing, they say you do not create the same level of harm. We say that's fine. Reparation should not be paid only for some disastrous harm, Mr. Speaker. Principle of reparation works in any kind of the harm, and we believe that simply works. That's like kind of fine in the court system, in which even for some little kind of law violation, you still have to pay in fines because you still have to rectify the justice, Mr. Speaker, and we believe that's perfectly fine, and therefore comparing principally on a utilitarian basis, it's not categorically the same which we require on our side of the house. The last thing, the rebuttal, they say that in vast majority of instances, people still cannot see that because there are poor people, etc. We say in vast majority of developing countries, museums are free. It's extremely important because the national identity building, because of the promotion of the government, it mostly happens through different religious signs. It happens through the symbolism in such kind of the countries. Therefore, they're mostly interested to make them free. Even the heritage in Russia is free, Mr. Speaker. A lot of museums in Russia, Kazakhstan are free in order to enter to it. But even if it's not free, it's something which is extremely miserable money, which is even like less than 1% of the salary of even poor person. Therefore, we believe it's still possible on our side of the house for that people to engage there. The last thing about that, these things are going to be destroyed, etc. We believe that's just the mechanistic point in which we still can work out how we're going to save them, how we're going to work that out. Not all the states like Africa are so extremely bad, and also it doesn't mean that African states doesn't have simply money to store and to save this historical heritage. We don't think that's a huge problem we have to care about. Closing, we have something. Okay. So, why principle matters in this debate? Two things. First, motion is about the rectification of justice, Mr. Speaker. Rectification of justice is something which is extremely impossible to empirically quantify, and therefore we explain to you that in most of the cases, principle should matter here. But second of all, culture, spiritual ties, feelings, symbolism. So we show to you that both things are extremely difficult empirically to quantify them, and therefore principle should stand here. What is the main principle in this debate, Mr. Speaker? We believe it's the principle of ownership, and we explain to you in our side of the house why the initial ownership of these historical artifacts by different Western countries are unjust. How principle of ownership works? Three things, Mr. Speaker. First, it's the initial acquisition should be just and fair. Second, the transfer of the capital should be just and fair. And third, this capital should not create any kind of harm on its side by the use of the ownership, Mr. Speaker. Why do we believe that we win on all three criteria, which are extremely important in the principle of ownership? First thing, Mr. Speaker, my partner already explained to you why it was acquired and taken unjustly in vast majority of cases by the Western countries. I'm going to talk about the rest two criteria. The second one, even if the acquisition of the capital was just, in vast majority of instances, the transfer was unjust, Mr. Speaker. The first thing is Jews, Ottoman Empire, it's Russians, it's Roman Empire, which lost a lot of capital which they bought from other countries during the wars, and it was stolen from them, and etc. Second of all, it was sold without the consent of different authors, like the things of Leonardo da Vinci, which was sold never they asking him a consent, and therefore we believe the copyright is also violated here. But third of all, it was considered as a payment after the war, as a reparations and etc., even if it shouldn't be. The case why it happened simply because of the fact that the winning states during after the wars and the post-war period, they had more bargaining power, they had more pressuring power and leverage, and therefore they asked that because they understand they can make a lot of money on that, therefore they simply were willing to do so. But third of all, Mr. Speaker, we say clear harm which is imposed on people on our side of the house. We already explained to you why symbolism, cultural heritage, and the cultural ties are extremely important for the feelings and spirit of that people. But second of all, we explained to you that there are not a lot of alternatives for that people to go to that museums in British Museum and to see that. The opening opposition says there are a lot of migrants there. Okay, let's compare 1 million migrants to 2 billion people in Africa, Mr. Speaker. Let's compare to 4 billion people in Asia, Mr. Speaker, which cannot today see that. And we say even if they want to play quant in terms of utilitarian benefit, we're showing to you that utilitarian, they're horrifically lose to us on that point, Mr. Speaker, because it's going to be tremendous number of people on our side who would benefit from that. And we explain to you that this benefit is principal benefit for that people, because I already in framing shown to you how it's impossible to quantify on our side of the house. So last thing, no ways to return to that people all that capital and all that historical museums, because a lot of institutions are westernized and western biased institutions. institutions of human rights, institutions of human courts, they're all westernized with Western lies because they have money from that, because all the people who work in the departments are Western people, therefore it's less likely that complaints of such African and weak states are going to work on such kind of instances, and international institutions are not held also on our side of the house. So, three criteria which we put on this debate. We explained to you that our group of people are extremely vulnerable, they don't have enough means to migrate to that side, they don't have enough means to go there and to see that. But second of all, we say they feel more severe harm on their side of the house. They say in the Western countries, people still may think that it's also important for them, their culture was based in that. We say, okay, let's come back. We say it's not the unique and crucial part of the Western society. However, while it's extremely important, a tremendous amount of the culture and the spiritual feelings of that people in the developing countries about which we're talking today. But third of all, we say there are no alternatives for that people to feel the same symbolism on their side of the house. However, we explain to you that Western cultures have their own unique things, their own unique literature, own unique museums, etc., like Galileo Galilei, like Leonardo da Vinci. Therefore, we believe that enough. So, the best case for position in this debate, even if some person who bought initially fine and also transferred the capital fine in a fair way, we say it's not still the best thing. Because first of all, it's not within the motion. Motion talks about the museums, while a lot of individuals do not portray their artifacts in the museum, they rather just pass it to the offsprings. But even if it is the case, we say that the market in which such kind of things are sold is in and of itself was established unjustly. This market was established after the wars, in which Western countries taken all that things and they thought that, okay, auctions could be a good idea, okay, it could be a good idea to sell all that people to that stuff. And so, therefore, even if opening opposition wants to stand on the best case of the principle of ownership, we believe it's not going to be our side. So therefore, taking into account all these points, we're extremely proud to propose and stand in opening government. Thank you very much.
I thank the Speaker for those final remarks, and I invite the Leader of Opposition to close the opening half. Here. Yeah, that's your wish. Deputy Leader, when we're ready.
So basically, opening up government's case is that this thing was acquired unjustly, and therefore it is important to return these things. And therefore, when we return them, people in these mostly developing countries, right, like the place where these things have originated, they will go to these national museums, and therefore they will see these things, and that's very important. So three responses in that case. Firstly, as I already explained to you, why there are practical impacts that people now, their argument is depend on the fact that these people are really, first of all, want these things, and not returning them will be very, very bad for them. And secondly, when they return this and when they acquire, they will go and see this and they will feel this pleasure. Now, as I explained to you, why this practical harm is less likely to be happening, because if there is a vast majority of instances when these things are most likely to be destroyed. For example, we should understand that in the vast cases, that's to say, Western countries are developed countries, and therefore, in the past, they colonized these countries, and therefore, in such a way, they acquire the things with this, agrees opening government also. What does it mean that in these developing countries, the place where this thing has originated, are mostly unstable governments when they have most unstable geopolitical situation? That is, for example, in Colombia, because Pablo Escobar created such a chaos, like this word of Bolivar was just disappeared because of this chaos. This is just one example of how very unstable conditions, unstable environments in this place may affect make them lose these things. Why is that important? Because open government talks about things like this is very important for them, etc. And people should have access to these things, and people should like be exposed to these things, right? And by their logic, people will lose this right to see this history, this historical artifact at all, because we are proving why it is more likely, more probable that this historical artifact will be damaged to that extent, and that people will lose the opportunity to expose them at all. But secondly, even if that is important for them, etc., but we should understand this is not such a unique cultural identity, right? People still retain their cultural identity. Like they need to prove why it is like returning of these things, like why in the status quo when they don't return these things, why people are feeling such deprived condition, why they are feeling such an anger, which is that people actually like in this country don't actually like know, right? Like what has belonged to them and why is that so important that I as like average citizen of developing country don't like wake up in the morning and say, wow, Egypt, like I don't know, Britain is not returning my thing and I feel very bad. No, this not actually happens. But they don't actually care about these things.
Why?
No. So they need to prove why this makes them feel very bad, right? But even if they also have things that are unique to them. For example, we need to recognize that colonization happened in the past, like very long time ago, and therefore during that period, they already acquired things like that are unique to their histories that don't remind them of their colonization and etc. And therefore, these things are also unique to them, and therefore they can retain this cultural identity also. And therefore, it doesn't matter that these specific things should be returned to them. No, later. But also in their explanation that now people will in these developing countries will be exposed to these things because national museums are mostly free. I already explained why they're more likely to be like lost at all. But second, even if it is not true, when you return these things up, people don't, as I already explained, they don't much care about these things. They're most likely more likely to go there and see these things. But when comparatively, when they are kept in these countries, let's say in British museums, it's more likely that they have an opportunity and they're kept in a safe environment, and therefore they will be more likely. There are also national museums, that's public museums, and therefore they will be accessible. Also, before that, yes.
Even in cases of civil wars in Africa and Middle East, those states do not destroy religion and cultural objects because they have the same religion. It is crucial for all sides of the world. Therefore, they kill people, but they do not destroy churches and museums.
To respond to that, we say that it's not important. It's not like the case of one side coming and destroying the things. We say that it can happen in like different cases when like both sides like within the country can destroy things. It's like the matter of a certain circumstance, right? We are not saying that certain like civil wars will happen and someone will come and destroy the things. We say that it's not clear on both sides. It can happen because of like various reasons, but right? But secondly, I forgot the name. What they are telling you on our side is that this Western museum, Western culture also have a right to return, don't have moral obligation to return these things. Why is it true? Because Nazaré explained to you why these things are also part of their colonization experience. So we understand this more like a principle debate, right? They're saying that it is unjustly acquired and we need to return them. We're explaining to you, yes, maybe this was some guilt happened, but returning these things are not going to actually also make them redress, and I'll elaborate on that later. But note that we're saying that British museums or any other Western museum have a right to retain this artifact because they also belong to their history, and therefore we need to understand it was acquired during the colonization period, and therefore it is also their right to retain them. But more importantly, if we play by their best case, that we need to give them the kind of reparation, like principle, redressing, etc. But redressing reparation happens when you recognize guilt, when you recognize that these sufferings caused, right? But on their side, in that case, you emphasize these past sufferings again when you say that like in the status quo, like what they're saying is that this is kept in this British museum. That's what happened. Like Western countries also do lots of programs that make them recognize this guilt, and like for example, Queens visit Kenya and etc. They spend lots of money to develop these countries, etc. But on their side, when you explicitly say that that's what happened and we made you to you bad things, and now we are returning to them, this is like emphasizing all of the past sufferings, and this cause makes them feel even worse. Very positive.
I thank the speaker for those final remarks, and I invite the member of government to open the second half here.
Government says about that there is a possibility to trace back to the original location, etc. We don't think that this is the relevant case, because it's not the question of who invented them, etc., but how it got to the West. And we claim that it's not it's not always the case of always West being wrong, and etc. Like, as it already had been said, that it is really complex relationship between countries, and etc. And also about the efficiency, that it will be more efficient to save them in the nations where those artifacts are originated, and we don't actually know, because like they say about like 6-7 artifacts and etc., but we think there are more of those artifacts, and it will be harder for them to keep them, because like most probably you can't keep them safe. First of all, because those countries are like developing, and they don't have that much they don't have that much power and interest in saving them as the Western countries. And we think that keeping them in West is better, because first of all, like keeping those artifacts is kind of an advertisement for the culture of those nations where they originated, because like why it is that good saving them? Because first of all, Western museums are popular like worldwide. Millions of people are interested in visiting those museums in the West, and they are interested in seeing those artifacts in the museums. Like it's not like only local interest of Westerns, but also like from the different points of the globe, people are interested to come there, and when they see those artifacts in those museums, they get interested in the culture of those nations. And why is that true? Because first of all, when you are interested in the culture of those nations, most probably you are interested in visiting those countries, and what enhances the tourism towards those countries, because more people are interested in visiting to learning more about those countries. And secondly, when you are interested in the culture of those countries, there are people who are interested in investigating, making researches. And why is that good? Because first of all, it leads to enhancements to more investigations, researchers in the field of the culture of those nations. And secondly, it enhances the worth of this culture of this nation for the globe, because as you see that most popular museums saving those artifacts as being really important for the globe, and etc. You see the worth of the culture of this nation, and as a result, more people are
On that point?
So
please notice, both opposition tables say that we cannot save them. First of all, we've shown why this developing countries has a huge interest saving this simple items. But second of all, even if it's not true, this merchant festival principle and it's independent of any consequences which I've shown and proven to you during my speech.
It was already said by our opening opposition that some countries are not that much interested in returning those back, and maybe and even though they are interested, it was already said that most probably that much important objects are going to be returned because those countries can use the power of international organizations to prove their right to return it, etc. If it's really that much important, it will be returned, but most of the artifacts should be stayed in the West for the reasons I have said. And also we think that in the West they most probably will be kept safe also because historians in the West are interested in saving those artifacts, in researching them further and researching the importance of those artifacts further.
I thank the speaker for those final remarks, and I invite the government to appear here.
Okay, let's start what closing opposition says. They said that if we will keep them in such meetings like the Louvre or something like this, or in London or in Paris, there will be more representation for cultures. But we say that, I will say in my speech why it is more practically beneficial for cultures to keep in their country. First of all, as my partner said, first of all, it is really significant artifact, for example, or just a historical artifact. And scientists or archaeologists who are really interested in this field, for example, Egyptian history, they will go and research, and then they will propagate in their works or papers that about this country, about this culture, and this will be more represented. That somebody's friends will go and say, you know, in the Louvre there is one Egyptian statue, but it is not even a statue, it is for example, painting. They do not even know what they have seen, really, but they will, of course, know, but they will not make a really positive impact for those developing countries who need this, who need this cultural representation. And in this point, we win for the cultural representation. And secondly, there will be more attention for this country, more discussion, and even if there is less chance to traveling to those countries to sing for them, rather than to traveling to London, if the certain amount of people will travel there, they will see the problems, the social problems, they will pay more attention, they will pay more, they will see the country in best representation, it will be better represented for a country if they will go travel and see not only the painting, also the problems or social problems. And it is better we say that it is better to one people to help than for 1 billion people to see this painting or sculpture or etc. So in this case we win that practically it is more beneficial, and secondly, in the case of representation, it is more represented and the more would be more popular, but it is not mutually exclusive for the science and archaeologists to explore this, but it is for us it is exclusive because they will go there and they will the attention and the thing they are discovering not only the artifact but also the environment, but also the culture and the correlation between this. And it is in this case the research of archaeologists, scientists, and such kind of authority people will be like really exclusive for our side of the table. And secondly, in this motion, we should say that why Western countries should return, not why what we should do in the case they must return. Now we're saying if you like, first of all, I want to say that there is really low probability that countries will not take something that costs billions of millions of dollars, because for the first reason, it is very important for them to keep it, and secondly, they will probably know that for the practical benefits that our table say, like whole proposition table say, they will keep it to propagate their culture, to propagate those, and even if they will not able, they are so poor that they are not able to take care of something, even the whole government is not, which is not the really probable case, Western maybe should return for the some moral obligation, but they will not take it and I don't care what you're going to do. No, it is really beneficial to take back them to the Louvre, for example, or London. Like it's not a case when we're giving you something without your consent. Like take it, like you must take it because you have moral obligation. No, it won't. It is not going to happen in that way. And then secondly, about the pleasure and the moral something like the pleasure. No, they will not get in ecstasies, for example, like they get from the drug or alcohol, but they still will know about this. They still will, like they will at least know about this, which is like how. At least they will know about this, and like why the culture and religion something is really important. It was said on the opening table, and secondly, in the some period of time, there is one really harmed nation. So therefore, like those nations are really easy to like steal something or like take the sculptures or paintings. And in that case, for example, for some period of time, there is Africa were like really oppressed, and all of the things, culture things, were taken in that time. And you know, if all of the countries will return all of these things to the Africa, and then there will be accumulation of some accumulation of some sculptures, paintings, and something. If it is questioned, then I will accept. If it is to chair, no. Okay, question. Okay, you are saying that this colonized country like really deserves this thing. We say that it is very different the current this state and the state that was colonized before. You have to know why this thing inherently belongs to this country. Okay, okay. As it was said before by my, it is about traceback that CEO said. You know, like for example, it is really clear logic. For example, I know that thing was like in Babylon, but now it is Palestine, for example, and but we still know that it was originated there, and we still know that it was belonged to those people who lived there, who faced that history. So we know that even if there like was colonization, still the historical, the geographical significance of the place plays a really significant role for the traceback, and we still know the geographical origination, and probably the culture living there want to know that what they face in the place where they live. And second, what I was saying about was yes, okay, then why our table at least wins causing opposition? Firstly, because we're doing extension for the opening government, which is not really easy. And secondly, we give the impacts, like, first of all, we are developing the practical means of the developing of the countries and their cultures, etc. Secondly, we're showing that it is still significant. And thirdly, we're showing that it is better representation, efficiency, and the trend can be identified. Thank you.
thank the speaker for those final remarks, and I invite the opposition whip to conclude the debate here.
So the important thing we as closing opposition give is that these artifacts will get like more interested people, and how that more interested people can help that culture of that developing countries, and why getting more interested people is like really important. Even if that artifacts are not like Mona Lisa that everybody knows and etc. Like just being in some Western museum, like people visiting, from people visiting like Western museums, there will be some of them who are like historians who are like really. Who are like really interested in the history, or some people like who like some I don't know novices who like started to care about the culture. Like why people are not interested if it is not in the museums, because like nobody really knows about that culture, that culture. But if it stands in the Western Museum, like people seeing it will maybe like Google about that. They will see about that culture. They will like get to learn about that culture, and like if it got interested in them, they will be more likely to go and visit that visit that countries. And but in those developing countries, the culture is like these artifacts are mostly important to poor people, because rich people can like go to that museums and etc. But like poor people have no alternative and etc. And in those developing countries, this country is not really interested in keeping the culture of that poor people, because these countries need to like get them the economic benefits, and they are like more interested in saving in economic development of the poor people than their culture. But like we getting more and more interested, interested people are more interested people were like enhancing this savings of that culture, because these people will see that that's their culture is like really interesting. Like I want to like see more and more of that. They will go to that countries and seeing that country is not really interested in that, they will be like likely to invest in that historical historical artifacts. Closing.
Oh, thank you. When they come to the country, they don't care even if people are interested or not. They're seeing the cultural background, they're seeing the problems, they're seeing the social problems, and all of these things are much more significant than all of the things you say.
To engage.
Country doesn't really want other people interfering in their political system and their economy and etc. They're seeing it's hard to change its economy and to influence the economy. So saying that for poor people culture is important, they will want to. They're more likely to change that, more likely to invest in that, buildings, or which is really important, and and therefore we with our case gets more people interested in that sense, more investment and etc. So we save. We help them to save this culture, which is really important to that.